I thought it's good. I said, we're gonna have, it's.
Please don't bring me down.
Okay, so next up, we have the board self-evaluation on there. Whether to make sure we touch base on whether or not we feel okay with where the council and, you know, we're age 18. That's where not is we. We're at.
I thought it was really good conversation. I would like to have a touch-in, maybe toward later fall, October, to see where we're at. Maybe use the same format. I mean, I don't know if Mary necessarily has to run it, maybe Connie could do it for us, or somebody just to give us a check-in and see where we're at. And I did like the tool. I thought it was very reflective for everybody. And I really like the conversation that is came from it. So, and I think it was open and honest, and I really appreciated that.
And it's a good. One of the continuous improvement standards under N6 is specifically that the board should engage professional learning, and that there's also a system of self-evaluation. So it's good that we're doing it for all the right reasons, but it's also something we want to be documenting for most of the reasons.
Okay, so we'll look into the fund to recap October movies.
And even if we do have a work session, that would be fine too, so that everybody can see that this is what we're doing.
Yeah, and again, there's some sample forms that we have. We went to, and that's good. I went to a session on self-evaluation. In some states, you have to continue education credits or whatever. And I had some book, just trying to locate what I did with them. They had some simpler self-evaluation goal where your people on board can do them with each other. So I'll see if I can find them.
Okay. All right, moving on. Board packet.
Say we actually
Committee votes.
skip.
Sorry.
Skip this area.
What is it?
Board committees.
Same item.
Right.
No, that's the area.
Yes.
We can-
Right. That's not important. Okay. What was this one?
Sure, so, we have two policies, 360 and our 4430 GE that speak to board.
And so each year at retreat is when the board members discuss those specific committees and which ones they're going to sign up and serve on for the year. So we can touch on what each of those are, the ones that, who's did them this past year, who'd like to do next year. And then those are the actual standing committees. So when we say the board directed, under the policy, they speak to, they support the strategic work of this. So you would think about any governance organization that all 7 people aren't going to lead out every bit of the different pieces of the work. And so the idea was at some point the board decided these are the committees that you would direct, have representation on. They follow the same process or should follow, and we'll tighten this up this year, but the open meeting records, driving minutes, membership, and all that's posted to the website. So those 5 areas are employee insurance, parents and teachers community, advisory committee, policy, finance, and audit. And then, and then it also includes strategic planning committees. I don't know that today we need to sign up for strategic planning committees because we need to spend time first working with you and our leadership team to talk about where we're going with strategic planning this year. If you were to, the district was at a point with Mary Hendricks Harris where there was the 5 different goal areas, so they're champions of each of those committees, and they had members that trickled down to action teams, and then we talked about creating an overarching strategic planning committee. All that work started 2 years ago, and so we plan to get that started in some format this year. I think once we do that, we'll want to come back to you with what those are going to look like and ask for participation. But we need to determine the first 4. Each of those committees generally have 1 board member on them, and then there's also 1 person identified as the alternate backup if the board member is not available. And then we also have other committees and working groups that are not board directed in the sense that they're developed by either the superintendent or a chief to guide and support their work. And those are the ones we've also had board participation on over the last couple of years, and so we can talk about that. And that's academic advisory. All 4 now of our negotiation teams, so FHEA, our ESC negotiations, FISPA, as well as Teamsters, the design team and facilities, equity, and safety. Now, I put a caveat next to equity because we don't know what that committee will look like yet this year, so I don't know necessarily that we need to sign up for that. And then also meeting with John Klein, the second full week of July, I believe, to look at design team, facilities, where we're at with the work of those groups, to talk about, is it effective still to have those in 2 separate groups to move forward with process? Or do we need to somehow combine them into another form? So really let's have a discussion about those opportunities and find out who wants to sign up to be the key member and then the alternate, especially for the board appointments.
Do we have times on those?
Even when they meet and what they're doing. I mean, Kim will be taking over insurance and finance and audit. I believe both of those have been meeting late afternoon, early evening currently.
Insurance meets like from January to May, and it's usually once a month.
At what time?
4:30 to 6.
Right, and I guess we can reestablish some plans.
Parents and teachers, it's twice a year, and it's in the evening.
Policy is once a month on Monday from like 3:30 to 5:30.
But they do get canceled frequently.
There aren't any to the.
Right.
Finance audit just got restarted.
I think that was at 4:30, we just had one. Last year.
You know, that monthly or
They didn't talk about when they were meeting again, except maybe in the fall of October. As the sort of audit findings were found was from a good discussion, but we didn't kind of set.
and when we get to these are absolutely the evening meetings, which they've all lost.
And I'd like on finance audit to talk a little more to Kevin about beyond the audit, what the topics.
So I know Doug did policy this year. I don't know, who's the back one? Oh, Jan, yeah. Who's the parents? Patrick,
In my case, it's back to that,
insurance is Janet,
backup.
I would like to, could I do the parents and teachers? I mean, I'm not able to.
I know.
Earlier.
really.
I would like to stay in insurance. I've been doing it since I've been in the board. I would like to stay in insurance.
Yeah, I will volunteer for policy.
I like policy, there, an avenue that has.
You could vote.
Their board directs committees, the policy doesn't state that it's one person that's in practice, so I think as long as we don't have to vote on any committee. The board can. have whatever they would like.
Yeah. Randy.
Because the alternates or whatever, then always still come to be advised, yeah, so.
Yeah.
Do we have somebody that just need the alternate concerns? That's the.
I don't care.
I'll be an alternate.
Yeah. I'll be the alternate for PAT.
Good finance. Good alternate for finance. Who said you couldn't have it?
You know, and like, your own thing. I think Randy's something. I'll be the small one. Oh,
Maybe if there's two that are playing with 10 policy, I think. we're okay.
yeah.
And so then, these are not board directed, but they're committees that we've either asked or, the board is. So, economic advisory, who did that this year, Patrick and Doug.
A lot of reading the curriculum and information. It's a great committee, but it's
It's a monthly, is that a 4:30 to 6:30?
time intensive.
What I think is a Tuesday night.
Yes.
Yes.
I can stay on that.
I have five, but somebody else want
I do that, it's not board directed, it's not, tell you what the purpose of it is, whatever.
Yeah, we look at curriculum, it's really designed, it's not designed to be just curriculum, it's designed to be, when you look at the areas within academics that are covered, that it gives us an avenue when we need federal programs, we need to get some input on whatever, or the college career readiness report is finished and we bring it through. So typically before something in our department goes to the board, we bring it through that committee to get feedback, if this is more clear, is there something else that's helpful to have on it? All of our curriculum do come through, textbook, it comes through. We talk about, like Jessica gave a presentation on here's the PD plan for next year, so we'll focus on. And so it's a 50-50 mix of internal and external people. And then we're really intentional about balancing out. We have 3 people from the north end, we have 3 people from the, like each feeder pattern in the high school. So 3 people from 3 community members from the Howell area and 3 staff members from the Howell area. Some of those staff members are teachers, some of those staff members are administrators, 3 seniors are. And then the academic team all attend because we all.
How long here for that? There were 2 on there this year.
We did have 2. I don't think that was the
We had the all
intent.
is what we did there.
So we have the alternate for that.
I said I would stay on.
But he can be the alternate.
Oh, show up as well.
Yes. Negotiations, I suppose, come back to once we have dates established, because that's could vary. So design team, we currently have 1 person on that right now is meeting, like I said, I didn't put names, but this might change, but right now that's a Thursday morning meeting. Every other week. They will focus on primarily and South North, once they move in from, that was group that worked on value engineering. When it moved beyond all the feedback phase into specific types of masonry. Window, examples of the windows. Doug, are you saying on that? Or is it too early? good responsible, so it's, and like I said, I will come back to you with updates. That's part of the larger discussion we'll have around process and next steps to solve it, because I think that and facilities have had different purposes at different time, and now the work is kind of split, and we can just come back to the clarity around what that committee would do, and maybe it once we want. Who's on? I think there's several people on facilities this year. It's not just Chad and yeah, and Mike went off that, but people have spots with me to where I was the alternate. Main person, because I want to say that that's. Equity, I think, was one board member, and are you interested in? I don't know what that looks like at this point. I think that's.
Yeah,
Possibility on that, and then at the board meeting last week, we were given the directive to reconvene the safety task force. To not necessarily go as in depth as happened back in 2013, but to reconvene, and that's a larger group of stakeholders. When I read through it, there was one board member on that. I think there could be more on that.
I wasn't on there as a board member, but I was on there as the nurse coordinator for the district. I would like to go back on that if nobody has.
And I think that we have small, again, we do not have four, but there are several of you that are interested in that. And we, and it's maybe we just need a couple of times to review the previous work, updated guidance and recommendations.
I would like to stay on that.
I'd like to be on. Feel like I'm overcommitting myself at this point.
Right.
Would you be able to stay on academic?
That's if you want.
Okay. Yeah, can you switch me and Patrick on academic? Well, really, Randy, if you want to be an alternate and come when you want to.
I will say what you're saying, you know, that you're.
Just a little more numbers. But if you really want to be on something you didn't sign up for, you want to discuss further, or just.
Yes, there's not. Randy and Patrick, are you both on academic advisory or one of you on alternate? I just want to make sure.
What do you want?
I mean, we just need, we would like a board member to be on it. I don't know that you both need to be there. Do both.
Yeah, so Jen just asked a question of if we start a communications committee, can we just start then people number one? So that's where we get into the area of the committees on that left sheet are the ones that are identified as board directed. They come as sub committees of this formal board. And that's just the written out of the open records in that piece of work. I think whether we were to start a communications committee just because we think it's important and valuable to do that and create the membership. Or I think that would also align directly with the strategic planning committees. We have 5 areas of communication engagement with families that's part of it too. You know, Lisa had a human resources committee that it was already in existence, became one of the goal areas and part of it that I think we would get started this year. And then we work with our associations for representation as well.
We think about changing how we refer to those product like the district committees that are like board appointed versus all the other committees until we start talking like change of name or concept of like committees versus like working groups or something like that, so that cut down that confusion.
Yeah, can I add a little bit? Because that was something that I wanted to touch on as well, because that was the last, I think, grievance hearing that we had a discussion as a part of it. I think prior to that, that was a discussion point to where there was consensus and partly a directive given to the superintendent at the time to clean that up. So meaning as far as we either needed to find what the committees are so that it's not as ambiguous as it is, or figure out what the policy and we say reasonable in the policy language, or I'm sorry, as appropriate, not reasonable, appropriate. So one or the other, both, whatever it is, I think would be beneficial. I'm not sure that that's something that you kick to the policy committee, or if that's something that you talk admin with the association, figure out what that is, or how we figure it out, but there seems to be a lot of ambiguity in that, and I think it probably would suit everybody to know what the clear definitions are. And I mean, I'm not giving you the record of this talking about, but that's what we got. And
I think we're all in agreement that that language needs to be cleared out. Without a doubt. Anyone disagree with that?
We are in agreement though that these five on the left, these are the board appointed committees, right? And these five committees.
And board appointed, you know, the distinguished piece I would distinguish is that those exist as an extension of the work the Board of Education is already doing. So again, the committee membership is posted online, we're posting meeting times and dates, we're posting minutes for people to view and see. Whereas the academic advisory group, that's not a board directed committee, so those are not minutes that are maintained, that are posted and discussed. I mean, they're accessible to sunshine law, but they're not something that we're posting and sharing because that's a work group that exists. Safety, you know, probably falls into actually, the board has under policy, a strategic committee, the board has ability to create standing committees or ad hoc committees, of which I would say the safety task force. So that is a board direction, and if we're doing it, it exists for as long as it's needed to do the work and then dissolves once the work is done. So I think from the difference between those two sides really is the ones on the left. In a formal sense, we're posting the information, the minutes, it's all out there. The stuff on the right, they're working groups, you know, whether it's a committee, a task force. That all the information available, it's not.
And maybe it's as simple as creating a flow chart and posting that somewhere. Just to help avoid the confusion when it's out. This is work, this is a, we have your task force, where work groups, you have all of that, maybe it's just simple.
And I just have a question, with different meetings. When I was on policy advisory and facility, those happen to always be Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday of a Thursday week. And so I don't know if there's a particular reason behind that, but that became a pretty overwhelming week, so that's why I had to switch with Chad on some of those things and then rather have some back on the advisory.
I know academic advisory, we intentionally moved it to be the Monday and the Tuesday after the board week. Not for all reason, but we ran into problems with, we got great input at the meeting, and we didn't have enough time to turn it around before the board meeting. So I hope now is that we meet right after the board meeting, it gives us a couple weeks to hopefully apply some of the input to whatever it is that we're taking the board meetings. This year, it's like, okay, well, when we do that next year, we can do that, but it's going to board docs tomorrow, so we can look at it.
And Dr. Addison shares policy, and that's a good conversation with her as well. Think about when meetings take place, since they often lead to recommendations for ratings and not have those that's, you know, within your health, within 2 weeks or 2 months. Things are. And then even though there's sometimes a committee canceled in policy committee meeting, I think if we could look at maybe seeing some old ones that we could either just validate and time stamp it and say it's 2003 policy that's been met with the approval of the current board of 2022 or whatever it might be. It's just looking at some policies in the last grievance one, there was like an outstanding one from 2003. It's like, oh, man,
I think that was the intention of that every year, each year we took the,
yeah.
we went through the 1000s this year, we go through the 2000s next year, so that those are constantly reviewed. And then anything that comes from the policy service has also been added. I think that really is the intention of that committee. And how that process is supposed to work.
Maybe there would be
It's a
something
reason.
formal.
Vision.
Audit, I don't know. Yeah.
I think each section was reviewed each year.
Because we didn't know, we recently had it printed because we wanted to just go this. as I, right now, there's a issue, so we're gonna go read the policies and there's what, a 4-inch, 5-inch binder. That was not a regulation, that was just policy. So the idea that there's no reason not to be meeting every month, we're actually still doing things on an ongoing basis. To make sure that- Anything else about?
So just to recap, are we looking into language here? Do we have-
So we updated, the website does, I mean, the header, I think is confusing, we were out for the district committee, but we would talk about the appointed committee, but it doesn't go into the next layer of the thing, but we also have these other groups, so I think adding that will help, so people don't think we were the only 5 things that are happening in the district, but that there's that distinction on that same page.
And then you're gonna list all those items?
Well, that's the problem, I don't know that I think the ones that were participating in,
I don't know that I would, though, because I think that those are working committees of the district that the board member might have been asked to be on, some way they may not be on. I think we're trying not to codify the those of board directors, unless the board wants to say that we are and you switch to the form of this. It doesn't change participation of who's on and what we're doing. I think that further causes.
Agreed, I think we need to be specific about these are board appointed, this is what we expect minutes to be uploaded on, et cetera.
Yeah, ultimately, there's strategic plan and the seats of the district. Well,
But you mentioned there'll be other things out there.
We used to have, it used to be like the legs of the strategic plan is what was on the left side. I think where it got messy was then when we switched over to the new strategic plan, and we had the goal area. And then that's paused. It looks like it's not a comprehensive list on the left, but I think once we get the goal areas up and running, it would be a comprehensive list of something from every year.
The other distinction is that the board appointed committee is a minimum of once a year, either through a formal report or through submitted information, provide an updated work of the committee. Acting advisor is not expected to do that because it's not a board directed committee, but you hear from policy almost monthly, finance audit and insurance that comes out through the recommendation for insurance for the following year. And then as with the strategic plan, the committee's up and running, there would be an expectation of some sort of formal report out.
I guess my question maybe is, will there be perception that if that's really distinction? It sounds like it's the board saying we have to have these committees, they have to report versus what's perceived as being similar work, similar groups, but then not having report like, oh, well, you're trying to hide something that you're not reporting out, the board's not reporting out, somebody else is overseeing these committees, and is there like a perception of lack of transparency?
Well, the sunshine law, is based on fresh off my MSBA. Which is insightful. The committee makes recommendations, does work on behalf of the board, it gets recommendations to the board takes their recommendation, that is the board. Oh, exact terminology, it's a board appointed committee, we're relying on that committee to do our work to make the recommendations for us. I mean, I look at like, I don't know, negotiations. That's a tough one. But we're taking the recommendation of that group as a board. I think there should be some, maybe something we discussed. Legal or something about where their interpretation of sunshine law and where it falls. But the way I saw it, I thought, when I learned that about the sunshine law, I thought you can make the argument for all of the recommendations. So where do you draw the line? Because
I think it's more of
work group.
a final recommendation. Think about you have your work groups, you have all these things. Eventually, they'll be making recommendations with that final. Recommendation.
Well, is the board appointed committees, is that for policy? Is that a policy someplace?
That's where you have to.
It's policy, the Board of Education may appoint strategic committees to assist in carrying out the board responsibilities. However, the board may not delegate those functions which by law must be exercised by the board. Strategic committees exist to support the work of the CSIP. Strategic committees align with areas identified by the SC as areas of focus. So basically, my thought process was a very clear line of, these are just committees that are formed to do some work, and they bring the admin the recommendation, and then admin sifts through it and then brings us a recommendation rather than us saying, this is a board appointed committee and that reports directly to them.
And it's not-
Give the, some of this, I don't know, I'm trying to wrap my head.
As an
around it.
administrator,
Yeah.
you have little ad hoc committees all the time for different things, like I'm gonna put together a committee trying to figure out stuff about the purchase part, because I've already figured out, we have lots of questions about that. So I'm gonna get some teachers, or get some admin assistants from the building, some staff, and in our office, we're gonna work through things about the purchase part, just to wrap our mind around it from all perspectives, but that's not on that list.
Almost sounds like it's like an operational versus like a board responsibility type.
Right.
So, yeah, Randy, I think we can follow up around the legal side. I've not heard that distinction before, because I think that becomes the gray area, like you said, all of the work we ought to do that would fall under that. And maybe it is, again, the idea of those ones on the left-hand comments, they are strategic, they're part of the strategic plan, and we know that works, make sure we're getting the stakeholder comment on the big picture, not necessarily the day-to-day work, which I think some of those things on the right fall more into.
Yeah, I'll try to find the video.
Anything else, everybody? All right. Next up, board packet process.
So we touched on this during Dr. Hendricks Harris' presentation. We just wanted to see if there was more discussion that we wanted to have related to the process of the asking questions and receiving answers. And for us, that was really looking, our current process is that on Friday, late afternoon, the week before board meeting, that Jane posts the meeting to the board. We have access to review it that weekend. Initially, it goes live on Monday. And we have this current process that exists of emailing the questions or asking questions, and then which ones are posted with answers that go specifically to board docs. And really just based on the conversation earlier, thinking through the best way for us to provide the information and detail we need to make the best decision possible, without also making every board week just be stop what we're doing and respond to a number of questions. I don't say it's not that extreme, but it could be, we're also in a unique situation right now. I think about some of the financial questions. Kevin Supple and his institutional knowledge, just knows a lot of those things out there for head. With all the transition, I think for a while moving forward, there's been such a learning curve for several of us to figure it out. And so it might be as simple as we just remain in conversation. The idea that certain questions, if you have, there's a phone call and we ask it, that we respond to the information. And if it's something that there are certain questions you might ask that I don't know that every board member needs, you're getting special information, but if it's a question that this is something that we would benefit from having the information that might help guide the decision. We go through the process of even into our board members or posting it. My understanding is the reason it switched from just an email to board members to posting it on board docs is, a community observation where the board doesn't ask questions, they just show up and approve it. And that was showing that there are questions that are still needed to be responses. So I don't know, our new members, how you feel about that process? Because we've been doing this for a while.
I do think all the questions still do need to be posted to Word docs, and it's an easy reference to too. And I don't know if this is something we continue to discuss as Ken takes over the role and what starts working for him versus what doesn't. But emailing in your questions as soon as possible to putting Ken on there, Jean, and myself, and then if I see an email come in there twice, I know that that's an issue. That questions from certain board members coming in to all of us are starting to have the same concerns. That helps. That those are things that help expedite, how we're responding to these, you know.
So like then you would say, 4 people have this question,
Like-
we're gonna put on the agenda.
Right, like this, Ken, I need you to look into this, I see 4 emails right here in front of me from the board members, 6 board members, we need to start looking into this and getting answers out ASAP and questions. It's like, we'll see you. Yeah, and that was me. Great. So email in the questions as soon as you can, I'll be realistic, so you, whatever it may be, we all have things happening too, but put Ken on there, myself, Jane, and then we can start working through that process once you get in that role of what's gonna work out best for you, whether it's a forward on an email quickly, wait until Tuesday, you know, I will say compiling all the questions and sending them out at one time, that is something new that has not been done in the last 6 months. Usually when there is a question and an answer given, we just forward it on to the entire board, say, hey, here's the answer. And then, you know, let's just say on Tuesday, Jane compiled them all and puts them on board docs. Like it's never been a, here's all the questions at once, and here's all the answers at once. When you do it that way, that is when you get 5 million follow-up. There's a lot of follow-ups, but at least you can spread them out over a few days. And I'm not a fan of receiving millions for some questions at once.
And I would just say, and this is the next thing that's that we talk about at the workshop. I just hope we get to a point where the communication is strong enough and clear enough, and we're using other mechanisms for discussing the topics, that this isn't the primary way to topic, because it's not in fiction. It creates a high level of stress and anxiety on the executive cabinet, full cabinet, to give you the answer. We want to. I don't want anybody to perceive this as we're trying not to answer them. Just to understand what it really is. We're getting questions for board members. Stop what we're doing to provide. And so short of everybody walking out the day, most of the week of the board meeting, to focus on that. But I also own the fact that we need to be then providing information in a different manner over time, work sessions, meetings leading up to it through our committee structures we work now, so that you get the information. Like I said, going back to what that one is.
And then we should be spending hours and hours answering questions, but I think once. I know what you're seeing, once more processes are learned, more information is out, and we will have that.
Do you think following something that HH recommended earlier about if we think it's going to take a significant time, we kind of say, hey, this is going to take 10 hours. We need to know that the whole board is interested in this information before we stop everything that we're doing and to provide them. I mean, that's kind of an extreme example, but maybe an easier one would be if there's a list of questions that come in and you're like, man, this is gonna take me 3 hours to respond to that. The balance is following up and saying, is there some questions that I can answer over the phone that's easier? But then we get into the trick bag of not all the other people have that information, so maybe they already know it too.
And I also want to be unintended consequences if somebody's voting no to something they might have supported, just because they're gonna say, well, I don't have enough information about it.
Does that mean we can't call and talk to each other in a special, we can only do it through email?
No, totally. You call and then, you know, so
Okay,
say
you
you get
guys
a
call
question.
up to ask questions, or
Yeah.
can you only ask it through email?
No, you can, so say you have a question and say I send an email saying, hey, I love this data of the last 12 months. In my mind, I may think it is an easy thing, you can just pull up a chart, but in reality, it's gonna take Connie 4 hours to do. Connie gets on the phone, calls me, Mary, just like a question, is there anything I can help you, because this is going to take me 4 hours. What are you, what's something specific for, can I help get the answer you're looking for in a different way?
And I like that idea of, going to Mary and Jane initially, because I think that also will also allow us to have some of those good conversations around, is this in the weeds, is this no respect, to understand the why people will engage in all the research. And why.
So just conversation.
So you guys can still call us and say, hey, can you sit down? I don't know what you're talking about here. That's good.
Can you give me a 4-minute?
And is
And
that,
then you email us whenever it's like, this is a big thing that I think we need clarity on. I'm gonna send an email and then I reply back an email. And also when it gets.
Something about the whole public to see or. But conversations are gonna help us narrow down what my concern would be. I may have asked the question in a wrong manner and you can say, "I give you this in this manner, will that be helpful?"
And we're trying to be responsive, even since April, we provided information with different memos, knowing that these are some of the questions out of the answer and provide it. I think there also is benefit, even if you've asked in an email and you receive a response, there are some questions to ask during the board meeting, because the public should know that we're engaged in conversation, you're asking questions. That just goes back to the most part, like, there's gonna be some that we don't know off the top of our head, rather than having to we'll get back to you in a couple of weeks or next week or tomorrow. If we know the question's coming, we can verify the information in that.
so I guess, question that pops in my mind is, unless it was something pretty benign, I would typically try to reach out to Dr. Hogan first and say, hey, can I reach out to Kevin and ask him a question about this? And so one, I include him in on what I was getting ready to ask questions about, and two, one, also seeking permission to talk to another employee, because in reality, you're our only employee, so we want to, and maybe it's something that you have directly on them as well, and most time it was you have to talk to them. So it means that what you, well, I want to follow whatever process. that you-
I do, because the reality is, I have a responsibility to, on some level, protect this team and make that clear. I think then the flip side of that is, do you want to go through the board president? Who's aware of it? Because the idea is, are you asking that your own information to one person, at the end of the day, you're operating as a team and a board making decisions. So how will you should that be disclosed? Right, at least initially that would just help me to understand, because again, I'll be learning, we're gonna be in 2 years, I'll be learning a lot in this year, so for them to come. I think it should learn.
So board members should go to the mayor.
Well, I'm saying that they would come to me, I've never, ordinance decide.
Yeah, emails.
So just for clarity.
And most of you do that, I think that currently is already practiced.
So if I like bump into somebody and they have a question, they can't ask me the question until they ask you, they can ask me the question. And
That's
then I
not-
know. Not that. I just want to make sure, because I'm like, "Oh, there's lots of layers here, I'm afraid I'm gonna stumble through school." Yeah. I like when there's nobody in trouble.
So whenever we have questions, email Ken. With the board, Ken, Jane, with the board president on there.
And I think if you call, we have response, if it's a question detailed enough, that is information that you can just leave and somebody knows before, somebody reached out, like this question. We should. Well, I think
yeah,
we
and
just create a situation where any one of you feels like you're not getting the information.
Agreed, and that's what's helpful to copying me. First off, you don't want to copy a bunch of people because then you start a meeting and everything. But if I see Patrick ask this 3 weeks later, Randy asked me like that, there you can sort of see patterns. And around when there's other things we can talk about. Okay. Anything else you want to add to that? All right, moving on. Workshop, second meeting.
So I asked Mary if we could add this just for additional conversation also. When the board dates are set for the following year, it's generally the third Thursday, and there's a hold date on the first Thursday, which sometimes we've used for special meetings, that kind of be more HR related or proven things. The board this past year met a little bit more often. In my prior district, that was a standard meeting. The board met twice a month. There was a work session and there was a business. I don't know if anybody in this room wants to commit to having even 2 full board meetings a month, because there's a lot of prep there. But I do think there's something to be said for the opportunity to use that time to have this type of discussion around topics. And so, if we know something that's often a little bit controversial, brings a lot, is the calendar. We're making calendar revisions. We get a survey that looks at, we can consider who the stakeholders, there's discussion. If you receive that, after formal board meeting, again, you're sometimes making a decision quickly without a lot of information, or we'll do a workshop around it. The workshops then often happen at the end of a board. So we've already been meeting for several hours, and then we get to a topic that we want to have a discussion around in additional information. And so I think people, when you're tired, you're ready to go, you're not fresh thinking about it. And so the idea of thinking about using that goal date when needed, or if there are topics that we want to plan ahead, it would not need to be every month. It's not a formal meeting in the sense there's no public comment. We're not doing recognition. It's really, we're calling the order. We're having a workshop around the topic. It's still an open meeting. We're seated like this. And so then that's an opportunity for maybe the director that really let out the work to speak to the board, share the information for the presentation. That's when we can have the back and forth dialogue, questions. If there's anything that needs to follow up before then, it will be brought back to the Board of Education 2 weeks later for the formal presentation and asking for approval. Again, it does add to these plates to a second meeting, but I think that in my mind, if we're using that strategically, one, if we know there's certain, we each year we do a budget workshop, we do a staffing plan workshop, calendar. I think that there are some, not every single course, but maybe the K-5 ELA adoption, which is a big deal. Maybe that could be something, but it doesn't need to be decided tonight. But I think as we think about the board meetings throughout the year and topics that are coming, or that we anticipate, we just want to have additional dialogue. It's an opportunity for us a little bit less formally to engage in this conversation, allow the public to see if that's taking place.
I do think that needs to happen. I think we all need to maybe start thinking about that this will be a reality, especially to Ken's point, that way your public can see the conversation happening. We can't keep having 4-hour meetings, 5-hour meetings. I mean, I think back to money, when she had a 40-page presentation, and that was even split half. Like, you're tired. You're not giving the academic team the proper. We were at what, 8:30, 8:45, starting that. And if we split these up better, we need the proper attention to it. We need to trying a little bit more instead of being at 9.
And there's also topics you could combine, like calendar and staffing. Since Lisa would be bringing both of those together, I think that would be a time to bring both of those together versus 2 separate ones. Because they both, like Nick to Connie, that night was brutal, and I felt bad for her because everybody had pretty much checked out
And left.
except for us. And and it was, that's why we were all there. So sorry, Connie.
I'm sure you'll watch the next morning on the recording.
Did you?
So I said, I'm sure all of you went back and watched it. the next
Oh,
morning.
I did. I know I did.
Just, for the
Riveting.
public and all of those things, 9 o'clock giving that presentation with all of our data, our student achievement, all of those things, because those are important topics.
Right.
And for it to fall so late at night, we need to do better with facts.
I agree.
When the budget meeting happens naturally, we use that for it's really one time. When we can start with planning ahead, if it was okay with the other standing ones, so staffing, insurance, calendar, insurance. That those could be on a separate night, and then just as we look forward to upcoming recommendation issues to become able to use it. But maybe, I guess the switch in thinking would be that full date to maybe actually secure it more as a full date, understanding that this will be more likely to use it. Maybe we can make an effort to
Yes.
out with that. We could review with executive cabinet and look over those things coming up and bring to a list of ones we really want it. And then if you guys think of other topics or things that you feel like you would want, I don't know if you other examples that we have recently that we would want to share with you.
Well, we did the progress one. That was a
Maybe
workshop.
it's very nice.
Safety committee, who make changes, that might be a workshop, so the whole community, it will be a one-time, 1 year. But
Okay, so we'll just mark those whole dates as actual dates, and it is totally acceptable if you have to weigh in or whatever, maybe. You start adding a lot to the calendar. Okay. Communication.
So really this, agenda item is just an opportunity for us to talk through the current protocols and strategies we have in place. And can we get feedback from you, I'll be transitioning to do more of this communication directly with you, but what worked with the last couple of superintendents. When I think about communication in general, my goal is one that it's two-way communication. It's not just us sending information to you, recognizing your roles with the officials in the community and that you are trying to share that information with us, and that often your questions are never understanding the work, so that we're able to communicate that out to our constituents. In my mind, that is built completely on honesty and trust. I think we need to start with an assumption that it exists. I know that's sometimes hard, but the reality is we also don't have time. We'll prove it through our actions over time, but we also we hit the ground running. We don't have to spend 6 months building a relationship and then start doing this work. This work is happening on the own. I think it's also important that this is our opportunity to improve the district's image with our entire community, with our stakeholders, with our teachers, and with our staff. I think that they view this as an adversarial relationship, either among the board intended, that further fuels community concern that's out there. Right? And I'm not saying that I think they don't ever see you all disagree. They don't see you ask us hard questions. They don't see there being disagreement and having reached consensus. But when they see us working together as a united front and that we are problem solving together, that's just going to restore, I think, the community faith in the district, in the Board of Education, in the administration. And so it's mutually beneficial that we're improving the overall communication. And then really recognizing that it is teamwork. The divisiveness is going to happen naturally around some things, but I think that if they see, and that's part of the workshop piece too, I think that they can see that there are discussions happening, questions being asked, to really understand, seek to understand the goals that be understood. That'll go along with we really talked already around the idea of not having response. I think that's important to me being in this room. We feel like we have a team that is doing good work. We want to honor and value the work of our staff and our teachers, up through our administrators to our full cabinet members. Anything that you do need, as much as I would say we want to minimize the questions and get away from that, I also want to give you information that you're confident in the work. You asking a question in a board meeting that we're not going to have access to and it catches us off guard isn't going to help anyone in the tonight. You're going to hear from us, and I will have no problem saying I don't have the answer to that. We don't have access to that data right now. We'll have to follow up. And I think that sometimes that's an appropriate answer, and that's okay. But if you're able to communicate with us ahead of time, we understand the questions and concerns, we're able to do that. I think it's, it just shows a breakdown in our communication. It seems like it's brought to the pitch. And I don't think that's the case, but I'm going to ultimately.
And then,
Yeah.
so, that questions are still gonna come up. We're in a meeting, I may think of something that I did not think of. Like, we have to be okay with, if I ask a question, you saying, I don't have that, like, it's okay, we don't. There, if you have a surprise every once in a while, because you just thought of it, definitely feel comfortable saying, I don't have that, I can get back to you, and we don't say this.
So we don't switch it.
Right, you're not going to, that's okay,
And I'll have no problem.
right, but that's what I want to get, like, just say, I don't know that. They go.
So the thing about our,
Maybe Jen, I appreciate the 24-hour notice on public announcement that you made. Not that I want to change anything, but I kind of have 24 hours to digest that information before it's made public. We've had like 3 or 4 of us, but I like having like 24 hours. I appreciate it myself. I don't know what other people, how they feel, but I look at it, digest the information. Usually don't have questions because it's been discussed quite a bit. But I know that it's coming out, the public asks questions. I know why, or what's there.
and when it's not an emergency situation, our goal is to give you the heads up first. We then like to communicate it to staff when we before it goes out to parents, because in the day of social media, teachers are then getting texts and calls before they even have a chance to know what's going on. And so that would be the flow, is that we get it to them several hours, if not more, before then it would go to the general public. And it would come out. And I think that we've gotten better at that system this year. It will not always be perfect, and then there are certain urgent or emergency situations that it almost goes out with the 5-minute interval.
Well, we still get it first. an incident happened at Francis Howell North. We got a generic. But then it went out a little bit, a couple hours later, but at least we had a heads up of what was coming forward from the police. Good.
And so that's the next portion, is really just to talk through a couple of those key things that we do have in place and see if they're working for you or not as we transition this summer. So we tend to, if we're talking about an urgent or emergency situation, something about, school closures related to weather, or an early dismissal related to weather, bus accidents, media reports, a death or a serious illness of an employee, water main break, those types of things, student protests, that our goal is to communicate via text to you, just as an FYI, this is what's happening, because it's something that we anticipate either through media, social media, other outlets that you could hear about it any moment. We just want you to have the information, and then we either follow up with all clear text, or with an email that provides additional information. We ask that when we send that out, really is a one-way dissemination of information, because we don't want to respond and create a discussion in the meeting unintentionally. But really that's used for emergency situations that we want to be to. Does that continue to work for you? Are there any other situations that you thought of this year that you should have been notified of sooner and that's the scenario?
No, I think it's a good rule to use, like, rule that says social media, that on social media involved, like those are the good judge.
The only gray area I've found this year, this spring has been around, bus. If it's a minor, because we get a notification that the bus hit a mirror on the no injuries or anything, that doesn't actually do the door. But when we got a bus, the lower, we got a bus that went out in the trees. And again, the one issue sometimes with that type of communication is that we're communicating you before we realize the fault information and the risk there. I think we learned one situation this year where we heard there was a bus situation that was not severe. Then the media picked it up because they got the wrong information from the ambulance district, which you reached out to us quickly to clarify. And then in the end, we found out that it was still no injury, but it was more severe. So I think that's something for me, just because communication is important. So we check in a couple of times this year. Just make sure that you're getting the information you need.
And there has been times in the past too, when there was a bus accident, superintendent's on their way there, gives me a quick call, this is going on, can you let the rest of the work? Because we all know you need to stop what you're doing. But if it's something major, that's where that process is.
We don't do a lot of individual phone calls. They really also tie to more urgent or unforeseen situations. And then recently with the planning agenda items, to let you know that it was something that we were doing, just to explain that to you. Could have done it in email, but also anticipated that there's a little bit more information I wanted to be able to share with you. So maybe those phone calls. I also feel like that those unofficial contacts and some the relationship building to. And back to Kim's point, there's certain things that I don't want any of it, like you can't perform all of this. There's certain situations. We do want open communication. There's also days when somebody's not, you have an urgent question, you're trying to get some information and I don't answer, or I don't answer this, you can reach out to somebody else. We want that to be able to. We provide copies of the chief's meeting minutes. We have a monthly meeting with FHA, and following that, we share those minutes with you once their team or has had a chance to read them, just to keep you in the loop around what's taking place after these meetings and what we discussed. And then been providing weekly updates around specific initiatives or issues that might be like. I would anticipate doing that as we move forward. If there are department updates that be included as part of that, we'll let you know. I think that's a good opportunity for me as well to report out just not necessarily the calendar for the week, but thinking about Ken's plan, meetings and events that are taking place or community events that might be happening. I'm just communicating with you on an ongoing basis what those were, what some of the highlights were of the week, and the good things that you're seeing. It's an opportunity just to keep you in the loop as I actually addition about what's happening. And then met with most of you as entry plan individual board member meetings. I know Kim is doing that as well as part of our transition, and something that I would like to do forward, just to continue to lead to build my relationship with each of you. And that's less about board business, not around topics, but it's just around how the communication working for you, what is additional learning you might need, or things we can consider as structural level to support each of you. So as you think about that, are there any thoughts or ideas that you have that would help improve the two-way communication between me or between this team? And
Thoughts, ideas?
At some point, I know you talked about getting things going on one. Trying to get us things that are gonna be on the agenda as soon as possible. And not so possible, sooner than Friday. Especially if they're gonna be. You probably learn over time what issues we're gonna care about. I think that would be.
And I think we're still open to figuring out enough to do that. The issue we're having, is we're trying to figure it out on our end too, that, you know, when we post things to board docs and they're going to you and they're going to the public, it's a final product that we accept, that, you know, we have high standards of one, that it's thorough, that it's accurate, that it's put together, it's in its final format. And when we begin to backtrack that timeline, we're adding back into our structure the full cabinet. You know, for example, if there's a presentation somebody's going to give to the board, that full cabinet would have an opportunity to review that and make sure that it's thorough, it's completely accurate. The issue we sometimes run into when you think about us meeting on a monthly basis, and then you begin to back up, well, then it's almost, we're having presentations for February prepared the week after the January meeting, and just the nature of the work and the district size. I think we're just trying to figure that out. So Randy, I'm not at a point where I can say, yes, we'll always be able to do that. We understand the requests, and I think if we can get to that point, we will. That's one of the things we'll be working through as an executive cabinet, a full gamut, though, just our timeline for board reports and board information to figure out, because again, if that would be helpful, again, if we have that 2 weeks in advance, we have to review it, ask some questions, that might help, that we're not rushing to respond within 2 days. Again, I think that could also tie back to around some of those bigger topics, programs, issues, if we're doing that workshop meeting 2 weeks before we're having a discussion, if we have time to follow up and. One other idea I had that I would like to work through is more with Mary, but in my prior district, it was a standing meeting. Right now, the board president, superintendent review the board agenda. That's the way, you know, the idea of a standing ongoing meeting. That will be communication. I think that's what would be more proactive around. You know, looking ahead a couple of months, these are agenda items that are coming up, just standing items. James working on a rolling list of just all agenda items over the course of years, that we kind of know cyclically what's coming up. Things that happen once to be once to be. It's not opportunity for us to do.
Yes, it does. So we can work together on what that may look like, but you know, I don't know the agenda until we all know the agenda. And I'm supposed to be part of helping create that. So whether it looks like, you know, we get that list together, we go over it, the board gets a copy of we have to figure out what that can look like. So we can be more of a collaborative team. And know what's going on. And not specifics. Just be, you know,
The other ideas around communication in general. Adam and Randy, it's still just a couple months of it. You know, something they referenced earlier, that 4 or 5 superintendents have been on the board and they're established chamber. Again, our goal is to provide the information we need to best govern. Yeah, you're loving that.
You referenced regular communication with the board that you weekly or how often that's taking place. At Northwest, where I'm currently at, like the superintendent does the best job of communication of any superintendent I've ever worked with the board communication. As you can tell, I kind of get all fired up and ready to go about things, and he will say, like, Kevin, you've got to have something in the board letter this Friday. If we're going to take that to the agenda, if that's going to the next meeting, it needs to, you need to have a board letter on that. And then we have our cabinet meeting. Part of our cabinet meeting is talking about what each of us need to put together as a board letter that we then turn into the superintendent, that he then works through and sends out. So that might be the way that you would get, you might not get the full report or all the information, but at least you would know it's coming. So, as we're working on projects throughout the month, you might just get a paragraph saying this month we're working on, the next board meeting, you'll get more information to have. And we don't post it on board docs. I mean, it's a sunshine request for pocket, obviously. But it just goes out as one-way communication. Then I get phone calls. If you have any questions, call me. And then board member has a call, the question, I get a call that night or the next day. And that helps me do a better job of preparing my presentation and knowing what I need to talk about when I get up in front of him. And he's done a far better job of that than anybody I've ever worked with. And it works really smoothly.
I think that comes back to the idea that the no surprises really is the two. When we don't, the idea that we would bring a recommendation to the board meeting in the first year ever hearing about that law is when it comes to on Friday or on Monday. We can offer the several examples over the past 2 years of that is not serving with us well. Because you shouldn't be surprised when we're asking you to consider what we in the same way people, but we're not asking that question.
I was just gonna add something. Just in effort to try to create a better relationship with FHEA, I reached out to their leadership to sit down and basically, one, try to establish some good rapport, and to try to figure out and strategize on how we have a better working relationship all together, because I think that benefits everybody in general. And so kind of one of the thoughts that came out of that, recommendations that came out of that was a monthly meeting with board leadership, with FHEA leadership and with the superintendent. So I think tentatively that's kind of the concept that came out of that. So that may be something that we can move towards. And I think that you see goes into it. So one of the other thoughts was maybe having a rotating board member sit on that, because obviously we won't have a creative meeting. But if we have that third person sit in there, they can choose rotate and out, and that way we can hopefully start to establish better communication, better relationships. So just thought I'd throw that out there since we're talking about forward communication.
Yeah, monthly.
Anything we can do at this point to strengthen our relationship with the team and the parts of the team.
Anything else to add to your communication?
And one,
Okay,
which
all right.
needs to be because there's no good answer to this one, because I know the last two retreats we've talked a lot and it's not good. We're still in a great system when a patron emails the board how we respond. So an example will be they email the same patron, all 7 of you, sometimes individually, sometimes as a group. Sometimes I'm included or Connie's included, or at least just depending on the topic. 1 or 2 of you will respond with a very personalized response. Somebody else will just forward it to me. I might respond to the person because I don't know if you all received it, and you all don't know that you all received it. And so we end up like backtracking to figure out who responded to this, who said what, how did you respond? Any patrons or staff, someone's getting offended because I'm not getting a response from anybody or getting a response from everyone. There is no good answer to this problem.
Yeah.
But I think we need to have more of a process to how we do this. And one thing I've thought of, and this is not fair to certain people, but I almost feel like anytime, patrons are emailing with one of the questions of the day cycle with the president, does the president go to me and comes to me? So we just were aware of it. Because we don't know, was it asked of everybody, or was it a question sent just to Chad? Do all 7 of you need to respond? Does the board president respond on behalf of the board? Or is this really an administrator question that one of us needs to respond to, but then one of you or all of you need to know that we respond.
I think the problem with Patrick reads his emails backwards and sends a response and another response is never mind, sorry. So we need to figure out a better process, and what I see happening now, just we tried to figure this out last year too, is I don't want us all to get an email. First off, anyone can respond to the emails however you want, choose whatever, but what we can't have happening is, I don't want all 7 of us forwarding it to Ken. And then Ken having to say, got it, you know, we need to figure out a way where we're not overloading their email boxes, just to make sure. So, I don't know if it's, once again, sending it off to, or just checking in with me, whether it's a text or a, hey, Mary, did this go to Ken yet? I think it does need to cycle through Ken with Jane on these also, of course, but I'm not gonna send an email straight to Connie. I'm not gonna send an email straight to Lisa without Ken at least being on that email. But then you may have Patrick send the email straight to Connie when it could go to Lisa. I'm like, so we gotta figure out a better process. So that way, we don't have, you're sitting right there. I can shift my chair. He's written.
And the good thing is that June of 2022, an email volume was drastically different than the last 2 years when it's COVID, there were hundreds every single day. It was unbelievable.
And we need to, we all want to see the answers too. Like if, you know, Ken does respond to a patron or, you know, whatever, whoever it may be, we want to make sure our people are answered as well. We can't just assume it's happening or someone's taking care of it. So we can just get a simple process down.
I mean, maybe if we get email where we can all see that we're all copied. And we get email where people are, they just look like it comes to me, but maybe others would be see, but you know, maybe if we all see that Mary is copied, soon you will route it to Ken. If not, I'll forward it to you and say. And maybe you already got it too, but at least that's.
I think that is one way. And then that way you know, if you're forwarding it to me, I'll be able to know that it went to everybody. And then when Ken or whoever responds, I can say, hey, CC or on your response, so we can respond.
I also was speaking in forms. Or emailing individuals and nobody else is hearing about it, then at least you're seeing kind of all the communication that you sending out.
Right, keep your finger on the pulse. In a lot of the things, you know, a lot of the emails we are getting now, you can't tell that it's just going to, I think it's just you, but to everyone.
It's not our question.
Right. But it's some are, you know, personalized to, I need help with the situation at this school, whatever it may be. You know, we just need to make sure they're routed the right way. and taken care of. Yes. So. Does that process sound okay?
Don't assume that I have to be with paper open. We were talking at a board meeting, we got 3 emails from the community concerned about safety in our schools. And I said, oh, I've got 3 emails, I'm glad you answered. These, you know, we talked, and this, but let me forward it to you so you know who they are, just to make sure we did not receive any of those emails. So don't assume because I got it, Mary got it, that everybody in the room make sure the right people got it.
And I also think it's important that patients, you know, they want to, I mean, any of these take now, thank you, I did receive this, you know, making sure it's before it's like a person when it is an administrator. So if it's sent to the entire board, and you can see if they're all copied on it, whether we are or not, we will assume that Mary has seen it and or I have it, she's still seen it. And then if they're sent individually to you, you're going to forward it to Mary.
Yes. And then I can.
I mean, that just puts a lot on the president, but I don't know.
In reality, I mean, there's not many that come along, and we can revisit it if we have major issues, but I think that's the best way to handle it now. And then I can make sure on my end that this person's answered and that everyone sees the proper individuals are CC'd. And then it's not stopping me from responding back to this either and saying, hey, FYI, sent it on all things, but you gotta respond.
And then we'll just, in our, I mean, it may not always be, maybe it- one of our. team
Right,
members,
whoever it may be.
If it was sent to the entire board, then we can make sure that you're copying on the responses for it, it's just, you know, what went out in the.
Yes, and while we're speaking of this, I have severe problems with the all word education email in the beginning. And I know last year we decided to keep it in house. But that still causes issues with your sunshine laws, your in meetings or anything. If someone were to reply all, whether it's an accident or not, right? It's still, a meeting can easily be started. We have to get in the habit of BCC board members, just even one board member on that subject line. And when you have that all board email, it's just an easier. You can make a mistake easier and inadvertently start a meeting.
So to be clear, it's yes, in the room and online. It's not trying to hide the email being sent, but when an email is sent to all 7 board members, if a board member responds to the entire group with not just a thank you, but asking a question, sharing an input, we're starting an online meeting. That is a little we don't want.
Did that email address get removed for external?
It's just removed for external and it's only internal.
So
And when I
only Amazon employees can access that.
right, which is still, you can still email about board business.
A contact.
We can get rid of it.
Can you create
The board can create their own board contact list and put 7 people in.
Yeah, I think that entire email address needs to go away.
But then, unless you, when you create that, you create one person, like say the president.
Can you
and then
create a
BCC.
contact that has them BCC? Rich, can I create a contact that will make people blind copied instead of in the
Well,
chat?
it'll be the same issue. It'll still be,
But if they're blind
But
copied,
if
you
you're
wouldn't
putting
reply all.
all would just go to one board member.
Like,
We-
could I
we-
create a contact
yeah,
that
we
has Mary
could,
Lang and
yeah.
the 2, and then everybody else in the blind copy?
or I think somebody said, if we just have that email address or any emails go to one person, like the board president. It's one way as well.
So that's another option, with the all board email goes to the board education president. And then it's forwarded to us, the right person, and then the response. we need to copy. That makes sense.
That's doable as well.
But again, that creates
But-
a lot of email.
So we would
I mean,
email Bill Ward.
We've been talking about this for like 3 years.
Right, or we just get rid of it.
Yeah.
Get
rid of it.
I did. Kept that in terms.
So when you think you should want to use them.
Because when you reply all,
Can you just put Board of Education and then just list this all underneath and then they can just pick and choose who they want to send it to?
We can on the website, yes.
or use one of those.
And then we would just have to get,
Right.
get rid of that
Get rid of that.
all inclusive email
Just
address.
get rid of
Yeah,
that email
All
address.
that's
Yeah.
what you all decide, yeah.
But, I mean, it needs to,
And then that way they can do it, then you'll see who's all been on that in email, then you see who it all went to.
We can do that.
When you're blind carbon copy somebody, the people who have been BCC, see the other BCC members.
They don't, but it's us,
You just
still put in a sunshine request and they don't pull, it's still pulling all the resumes.
and when you're BCC, you'll be able to see that it went to Mary Penn or wherever it may be. It's just that reply all, you accidentally hit reply all,
And
we can start making.
you can't do that if you did.
If you did BCC, reply all just goes to your.
Yes.
So if I'm gonna send you guys an update about something. What I'm hearing is that you want the email to go to Mary and everybody else with blind copy.
That would be the best
That would
practice.
be the best practice.
But when I say board members, that's how you guys will know that everybody was blind copy.
And the reason you don't hide like, again, once again, you don't want to inadvertently start. Any sort of reviews. The best practice is to be CC. And you can even include in your message, I've included all board, I think I DCC'd all board that's on here. It's okay to email, it's just that whole replying back. So are we going to finally get rid of it? Are we end this discussion? All board gone?
If it doesn't stop. A lot of things.
No, right. Right. Limit the amount of,
They're rich.
Yeah.
is it gone yet?
Yeah.
In 2 seconds.
He is just.
We'll have to take out the website too.
Thank you.
Okay, student board reps. Are we interested in bringing them back? I will say yes. Thank you. Is having our student rep?
I am. We can deal.
Same way we did it with expanding with middle school.
We're in middle school.
Yeah, we had all here, and those were actually the most vocal hearings.
Yeah.
That they were. So, the model moving forward, how do we? I see a couple notes on here, but. How do we? Do you want discussion around? it?
Well, yeah, the model, previously we had our secondary student, there was one which one was set up on the dais with the board, they were introduced. I'm going to encourage that question, but they just vote, they didn't get to say anything, that's maybe the things on. I think at one point we talked about the idea of having, you know, identify a high school student that might do it for an entire year, where they could better understand the process, the governance, be there. It was, during the last year discussion was with 3 high schools, and we don't have 3, but how do you get 1? And that was, so the model was that 5 middle school, 3 high schools, so union that we each have a month, so I get the less, 10 months over the 10 months of school. So that works, and that's what the whole high school, the schools can show up in this months.
Sunshine request. You want to continue to be notified. I think this is an important one to kind of discuss, because it is important to also keep your finger on the pulse of the community where we. So right now, we got to get a process kind of in place. How do we want to be notified? Just looking into what other things are on districts, there's a running Google Doc on Board Docs under library. There's, you know, how can we make this process easier? And do we want to be notified of them? Do we not want to be notified of them? Where do we want to go with this?
The way we have them.
I'm assuming if it's a vendor wanting to know certain things, that's not something that I would care.
I-
to know, so we don't have to-
Anyone?
I think it's good to know about, it because if someone's asking them, people,
Right.
for something that's going on, what could go wrong, what not go wrong. But, you know,
So do we like how Jane is just forwarding them, or do we want to create a Sunday notification with? What's easy, what gives you the Jane?
I guess it's 6 to 1, half dozen to the other. I mean, I did start an Excel sheet when I started last year, just to have an idea. I guess I could turn that into a Google Doc, and then
If we're in, we can just go look at it.
So that way you can see like if other stuff like
I mean, it's
something I've listed every sunshine, the person requesting, whether they charged them, whether they paid for it, and you can just complete it. So you can see all of those things.
Is that
Have
what's
access
easiest
to
for
that?
you? Whatever's easiest.
That'll work for you. That'll work. I'm sorry, am I hearing you don't want me to send you an email? You can just go to this.
Yes,
Google Doc,
if I'm
see that,
wondering where
and
we're
then
at,
Okay, once.
but of course, if you get a big one in. I would think that would probably be all hangers, just throw it in the update or.
There's a way you can sign up to be notified without changing, right? So if you do want to do.
Yeah, you-
Google email. So change it.
Does that sound okay? Does that work? Sounds a little bit simpler. Okay. Anything else on some request? Calendar of events.
It's the only item I had. Looking ahead, we talked about potentially the second meeting, but thinking ahead to negotiations for 23-24, because we will negotiate with all for employee groups in next year. we need to have a special closed session, we see the negotiations, correct? So I want to get something on the calendar now preferably, because I was thinking, whether we did that on evening or if we did it on a Saturday morning for 3 hours when people can come in to the topic for us to work with you. Because I'm hoping this year that all negotiations will occur here, so it's happening early in the spring. So in my mind, early December, I'm open. With that, we're on Tuesday night meeting, or Saturday morning, or directing you guys for hours, and then I just like to get that pretty established now. If not, it's just keeping you.
I like the idea of having a date set, whether it's today or a month or so, but that way we know what it is, and it's a date everyone can be available. Evening, Saturday, whatever it may be.
I mean, we could make together some dates in. Kind of looking at the calendar. We've not talked about when we're starting, but I think everybody's hope is that we do this in the spring, you know.
Is that you dates for release for class? So, I mean, I think that we intended to start,
What was your hope of prep dates though?
we were prepping FHA in December,
Okay, so we
we
were.
were ready to go, and then ESCs in January to be ready to go the following month.
So, but you were not hoping to start any negotiations before.
No,
Okay, well then maybe what I can do is work with Mary and Jane, we'll create a doodle with our teams as well, for some dates late November, early December, and then just see what works best. For everybody in the calendar.
Anything else?
I chime in about, so my understanding is several years ago, there used to be a calendar, then we put it in, I think it was called board update or the board report at the time that went to, and then we went to a printable format. Then we got to be part of the problem with buildings, these were events that were happening at buildings, supplier conference, band conference, things that someone would like to drop in on, maybe, you know, so we did a printable version. The problem is, so those dates were changing partly with COVID, and so you have this calendar that's completely out of date. Then we moved to this Google Sheet version and we shared out a link, and it's kind of the same idea. I'm not really sending it out all the time, but it's there if you want to look at it. I'll be honest, we have not been updating it very well. I'm happy to do it if you find value in it, but as you know, I think you know, right now it's difficult with 23 schools. We don't have a centralized system. We really know where all of the events are. So what I'm doing now is through school meetings and things, trying to pull out things that give value, so it can certainly be done. But if that's something that you're like, there's so many other board things going on, you have everybody's schools, we're focusing your efforts there, I know you're probably all signed up for it, so it is. If you're not using it, I'm happy not to update it. So just looking for some guidance, if you find value in it, we'll make it a priority to try to make sure that up to date with at least, 5 or 6 things around the district every month that you might have to go to. But if you're not really looking at it, we'll take it off our priority list.
I personally, if I'm looking for something, I mean, we have a lot of schools that will email us, invite us to things. We have, in my mind, that's where if someone is taking the time to do that, that's something we need to pay attention to. I don't go look at that calendar. I don't find it important. Like people will email us. We have buddy schools. We have, if I want to know if something's going on in Barnwell, I go and look at Barnwell's calendar or social media. I mean, it's really, my opinion is, don't worry about it, but that's much.
I would like to, as long as we're talking about calendar events, I don't know if you guys have had a discussion of Canada or your Canada. I thought one of the really useful things within, I know it stopped because of COVID, was our senior pals. And I would really, really like to see that reestablished again. Only because I think it really brought our seniors in and they really felt connected to the schools. Some of them had kids in the district, some of them didn't. And I mean, I don't know that it needs to be every month, but maybe once a quarter or even once a trimester, like fall, fall, winter, spring. I just thought it was really, really important and it just really made our seniors feel like part of our community. That's just my thoughts.
Yeah, Chris Garland and I just met this week, actually talking about family learning series, bringing those back this fall, senior pals. I told them that they have been available, but I don't think a lot of our seniors know about it. A lot of so all of those will be part of this larger community meeting. Just to revamp some of the first part of those started in September is what we're targeting. Getting where at. We've had some former senior pals reach in and say, hey, we're kind of ready, we're feeling comfortable coming back in, and so we've got a list of folks too who are interested, and so as soon as we get to the end of the job, so.
They got pretty big.
It did
At least
get long.
from when it first started, and then it also brought people in to know the particular reason why we're trying to ice them. Walk the ball.
And it really got the people asking the questions, because there was a lot of false information out there. And having somebody just talk for, like, Mary talking for 5 minutes about facilities, or John, or even Connie talking for 5 minutes about academic, what our focus is. Those, they hear, and that's their thing, I mean, they hear math, they hear this, but they have no idea what that means. And I think that's really important to draw them in, to, you know, that they do feel part of our community.
And I think that, we'll get to have a broader conversation around communication in general, and that all of that was fall into that.
Okay.
You know,
I just,
or whatever, maybe whatever Ken had mentioned earlier. I guess it's to get more specific.
right, I just really, that was one of my favorite things to do, and I just was really sad to see it go.
Okay, anything else under calendar of events? So we're gonna mix the Google Calendar. And hopefully schools just continue to notice the things. I think this is the last, this past year, we got a lot of things.
Especially the last couple of months. Mhm.
So, okay. Is that it, guys? All right.
Superintendent comments.
Board, I would like a motion to adjourn the board retreat. Doug and by roll call.
Chad Wayne.
Aye.
Doug Bigemeyer.
Aye.
Randy Cook.
Aye.
Adam Bertrand.
Aye.
Mary Lane. Janet Stiglish.
I.
Patrick Lane.
All right, thanks all.